for all human beings, applying the 14th Amendment for all. This is our next fight in the pro-life movement. And joining me today is my very good friend, Josh Craddock. He is the founder of Harvard Law Students for Life. He is the former editor of the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy. He's now a practicing lawyer. He's also an affiliated scholar with the James Wilson Institute. Thanks, Josh, for joining me.
Glad to be here, Kristan.
Well, we're talking about, as we're getting ready for the June 24th National Celebrate Life Day, where Students for Life, Live Action, 40 Days for Life, Pro-Life Partners Foundation, all of these national pro-life groups are going to be coming together to celebrate the end of Roe versus Wade with the Dobbs decision. One of the big things we're going to be talking about and really unveiling at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial is this concept of equal protection for all human beings, that the 14th Amendment should apply to every person in America, including the preborn. But I know at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on a Saturday afternoon in June is probably not going to be the best place to go through a full legal explanation of what the 14th Amendment is and why it applies to preborn persons. So we wanted to have a special live stream today to, one, tell you make sure to register for National Celebrate Life Day, nationalcelebratelifeday.com and .org, where you have to register. It's free, but you've got to register for the National Park Service to attend. There's also an evening gala. But two, kind of provide that intellectual background for what you're going to be hearing Students for Life, Live Action, and the whole of the pro-life movement talking about in the weeks and months and years to come. So thanks for coming on to answer all my hard questions.
Absolutely. And I think the Lincoln Memorial is actually the perfect place to hold this, because when we're talking about the 14th Amendment, that was the amendment that was adopted and ratified right after the Civil War in 1868 to ensure that no human being would be denied basic legal rights. And so that amendment says that states can't deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny any person the equal protection of the laws. So what my research is focused on is looking at what that meaning of person in the 14th Amendment means. And it's amazing, if you actually look back at the history of the 14th Amendment, back to the time when it was ratified, it was very clear that the meaning of the word person included the unborn child in the womb. And so we can look at several different lines of evidence.
Because when I bring that up on campuses sometimes, people are like, oh, that only was talking about Black people. That's the 14th Amendment only applied to Black people. But that's clearly not true if you look at the words of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, exactly. It's been around for a while. This kind of mistaken argument that the unborn child can't be protected just because the specific focus was securing the rights of Black Americans. The framers of the amendment actually chose much broader language, any person, right, to ensure that this no future human rights atrocities like that would happen. So, to determine what did the meaning of person, what was the meaning of person in 1868? You can look to definitions from when the 14th Amendment was ratified. You can look at the historic state practices related to abortion. And then you can actually look at what the framers of the amendment themselves said about what they thought the amendment would accomplish. So, just looking to that first line of evidence, definitions, you can open up dictionaries of common and legal usage from the time of the 14th Amendment's adoption, and you'll see that the term person was pretty much interchangeable with human being. So Noah Webster's dictionary from 1864 defined the term person as relating especially to a living human being, a man, woman, or child, an individual of the human race. So for him, there was no difference between human being and person. And in legal usage, it was pretty much the same. Every human being was considered a natural person. The authoritative treatise writer, William Blackstone, actually began his discourse on the rights of persons, the first book of his famous commentaries, with a discussion of the preborn child's right to life and personal security. So Blackstone wrote that life is a right inherent by nature in every individual. So according to him, if human life existed, then legal personhood existed also. There wasn't any artificial distinction between biological human life and legal personhood. So the 14th Amendment, which was similar to the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that it was meant to support, actually codified equal protection of the fundamental rights of persons, just as those had been expounded by Blackstone and other legal treatise writers. Yeah, so that's kind of, if you look back at the definitions, we could also go to state practice on abortion, because a lot of people don't realize that for centuries of common law, we consistently treated the preborn child as a person whenever it would be for his benefit. So you can look at Blackstone, as we just discussed, or Lord Cook, as well as a lot of landmark English cases. And you can even look to state high courts in the years leading up to 1868, which declared that the preborn human being throughout pregnancy, quote, is a person, and hence under civil and common law to all intents and purposes a child as much as if born. So that's pretty awesome when you look at these court cases from the 1800s that were actually dealing with abortion and treating the unborn child as a person. In fact, when the 14th Amendment was adopted in 1868, the states widely recognized preborn children as persons at all stages of pregnancy. So nearly every state had codified criminal prohibitions against abortion by statute. And if you can believe it, Kristan, 28 jurisdictions labeled abortion as an offense against the person. And in 23 states and 6 territories, laws referred to the preborn individual as a child or an infant. And in fact, the same Ohio legislature that ratified the 14th Amendment called abortion at any stage nothing less than child murder. So really strong language coming from the 1800s. They understood that the unborn child in the womb is a child, is a person.
I think that's a really important point, because the Ohio legislature, that's an important point, because the Ohio legislature, which ratified the 14th Amendment, also had passed a law that also acknowledged the personhood of the child in the womb. So it's, I mean, that is apples to apples, showing you that when you look at the language from the 14th Amendment, where it begins in Section 1 talking about citizens, but then it switches and starts saying persons, they clearly knew. And there was a reason why they talked about citizens, and then they also talked about persons.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you look at that text in Section 1, the first sentence says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, right? And so a lot of people come to the 14th Amendment and they see that word born in the first sentence and they stop right there and they say, well, it says born in the first sentence. How could it have any application to unborn children? But lawyers, we know that you read carefully, and all it's saying is that you have to be born or naturalized to be a citizen of the United States. It's not defining personhood or saying that only citizens are persons, right? In fact, it explicitly contemplates persons who are not citizens, right? People who are not naturalized or not born, right? And so when you continue to read Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, it expressly talks about any person when we get to the due process and equal protection clauses. So every person, not just citizens, every person is entitled to due process and the equal protection of the laws.
The quote is, no state should deprive any person, not citizen, of life, liberty, and property, nor deny any persons in its jurisdiction equal protection.
Person. Exactly. And we know from that historical evidence, looking at dictionaries and the common law of abortion, that the unborn child was considered a person. And you can even look to what the framers themselves thought about what the amendment would accomplish. They expected their amendment to protect every member of the human species within U.S. jurisdiction. So Senator Jacob Howard, who is the sponsor of the amendment in the Senate, he said that the amendment's purpose was to disable a state from depriving not merely a citizen of the United States, but any person, whoever he may be, of life, liberty, or property without due process. And even the lowest and most despised of the human race were guaranteed equal protection.
That's okay. So I think that's a very important point, because we, as pro-lifers, we know that abortion is depriving due process and equal protection to preborn human beings, right?
Yeah. Well, any state that has homicide laws on the books, right? We prevent the unjustified killing of other human beings. Any state that has a homicide law would be denying equal protection if it denies the application of those generally applicable laws when the victim is an unborn child. right? It would be obviously an equal protection violation if we had homicide laws and said, we'll enforce our homicide laws unless the victim is Black, right? That would be a clear equal protection violation. But that's pretty much what's going on here when it comes to the unborn child. We're saying, we're going to enforce our laws except when the victim is an unborn child. Then the abortionist, right, can get away scot-free. That homicide doesn't count. And so these permissive state abortion laws violate equal protection.
And is this why in Roe versus Wade, the majority said if the court ever finds that the child in the womb is a person, we have to reevaluate our decision here?
Yeah, so in the Roe case, the state of Texas actually argued to the court that the unborn child is a person within the meaning of the 14th Amendment. And Justice Blackmun rejected that proposition, but he admitted that if personhood was established, then the case for abortion would collapse, and the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed specifically by the 14th Amendment. So even though he disagreed on personhood, he acknowledged that if personhood was proven, states would not be allowed to permit abortion.
So how do we demand, we can just get up and declare it, demand equal protection for the preborn, equal rights for all, that the 14th Amendment applies to preborn human beings who are persons. But how can we use the 14th Amendment to do that? What are the tools that are already written in the 14th Amendment to do that? Like who has to take this action? Who do we have to convince?
Well, so every branch and level of government actually has a role to play in ensuring equal protection. So the states retain their primary duty to protect the inalienable right to life. But there's also this inescapable federal role. So the 14th Amendment specifically grants Congress power to enforce by appropriate legislation the amendment's guarantees. That's in Section 5 of the amendment. And the Supreme Court has explained, about 150 years ago, they said that whatever legislation is adapted to carry out the equal protection of the laws against state denial or invasion is brought within the domain of congressional power. So Congress has this enumerated power. Second, a pro-life president who actually understands the Constitution's protections for life can instruct each department and agency within the executive branch to recognize and protect human persons in the womb. And of course, courts could and should apply the original meaning of the Equal Protection Clause to ensure that there are protections for preborn children whenever those cases come before a court.
That's significant because what you just said is, one, the 2024 presidential election really does matter. Vote pro-life first. Two, that there is a federal role for Congress to play in protecting human life. I know some of our friends on the Republican side of the aisle have been kind of saying, oh, this is a state's issue now that Roe is reversed. But I think it's been part of the platform of the Republican National Committee since like 1984, before I was born,
that's right,
to say that the personhood should apply to the preborn in the womb, which makes it a federal issue because of Section 5 of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, Congress has this enumerated power in Section 5. Every Republican platform since 1984 has actually called for the 14th Amendment's protections to be guaranteed for unborn children. And even President Reagan actually agreed that the 14th Amendment applies to the preborn. He said so in a proclamation in 1988. So this isn't some new idea. It's very clear that Congress has this enumerated power to act. It is a federal issue. I mean, even Justice Kavanaugh in the Dobbs decision, he even said that it was for elected representatives or in the states or Congress. So even Justice Kavanaugh specifically called out Congress and their potential role to play in addressing abortion.
Wow, I think that's amazing because we've seen so much back and forth from Republicans of like, this isn't an issue, but it really is an issue. And Blackmun himself in Roe versus Wade admitted that the 14th Amendment comes to play here, and that if Congress declares and finds that the preborn are persons, which they clearly are because they're living human beings, member of our species, then Roe versus Wade would have to be reconsidered because life is before liberty and pursuit of happiness, and there's a very real reason why our founders put those natural rights in that order. That is so helpful, I think, for us and for all of us now in the pro-life generation, as we look forward to this next wave in the pro-life movement of there is no more Roe versus Wade. There's no more marching for a reversal of Roe versus Wade. What are we marching for? We're marching for equal rights for all human beings. We're marching for a 14th Amendment applied to all persons in America, including the preborn child. That's what we're marching towards and marching forward. And that's really what we need to be encouraging our elected officials, especially at the federal level, to understand and really grasp. I think this was really helpful personally for me to explain just how the 14th Amendment does apply to preborn human beings. Yes, it talks about citizens, but it also talks about persons. And the vehicle that's given to Congress in Section 5 to allow Congress to clearly state that the preborn in the womb are, in fact, persons who deserve the equal right to life as we do.
Yeah, every human being is a person. The unborn child is a person just like you and me. And thankfully, our 14th Amendment actually recognizes that and ensures that every person is entitled to equal protection. So no state can deprive some disfavored group like the unborn from the equal protection of its laws. And that is why abortion is unconstitutional, right? Permissive abortion laws in the states are unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment.
Amen. I can't wait to be with you, Josh, on June 24th on the steps of Lincoln Memorial, declaring before America, now is the time to apply the 14th Amendment to all persons living among us, born and preborn. It's going to be such an epic moment for the pro-life generation. I hope all of you are tuning in, have gone to or will go to right after this, nationalcelebratelifeday.com. Register now for the free rally. Alveda King, Lila Rose, Sean Carney, myself, others. Oh, Michael Knowles are going to be there. It's going to be an incredible moment standing on the steps of Lincoln Memorial, followed by a celebratory evening dinner that's not a fundraiser, but it's just really a celebration of the pro-life heroes of the 70s and 80s who got our movement to this place, and really celebrating what we know you all in the pro-life generation will be accomplishing as we march forward in declaring equal rights for all, 14th Amendment for all, so we can finally abolish abortion throughout our nation. Thanks, everyone.